But I think eventually what I would like to see from the body cameras and in-cars is that you have a live stream going back to somebody, whether it be dispatch or somebody that is dedicated to watching those live streams. The video itself is running an AI background. So when you come in contact with anybody, it's already doing a facial recognition type search. It's running that person against NCIC records, and it's providing any information before you ever even get the ability to run that person on your radio or go back to your car to run that person. So if that's a wanted person, dispatch is already notifying you of, hey, you have an issue here and we're sending you help.
So in the future, an officer is talking to the public and dispatch is telling him through his radio, oh, by the way, the person in front of you has warrants?
Correct.
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. My goal is to give law enforcement officers more encouragement than what they usually get. So on this podcast, you'll hear from cops who have been where you are, sharing their wisdom, experiences, and the lessons that they've learned. I interview a wide variety of police on a wide variety of topics, from the LAPD all the way to Scotland Yard. The guests on Hey Chaplain are going to help you confidently navigate through trauma, stress, your career, and beyond. The growth of this show depends on word of mouth. If you're a regular listener, would you take a quick time out, take a moment, and copy the link to this show and send it to a cop who might like to or maybe need to hear something positive and helpful? You guys are the reason that we have listeners in all 50 states and over 100 countries. But I routinely run into cops right here in my hometown of Kansas City who've never heard of Hey Chaplain. So please tell a cop or someone who loves a cop. Today we're talking about technology. Drones, artificial intelligence, body-worn cameras, and more are proliferating through police departments at a rapid rate. And I find the whole topic just fascinating. So our guest for this episode is Captain Richard Breshears. He's a captain over the technology unit in a police department right here in the Kansas City metro area. We get to hear from him what cool things technology is doing in law enforcement and where it may go in the near future. Here's Richard Breshears. Hello, Captain. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Jared?
I'm doing great. I'm glad that you're here today. We're talking about technology and all the fun stuff that entails. But first, I want to hear a little bit about your background. You've been a cop for how long?
A little over 18 years now.
What kind of jobs have you done?
A little bit of everything. Just like everybody else, started in patrol, had the opportunity to go to investigations for a while, for a couple of years. Had the ability to go as a public information officer, community policing, and now in the technology unit.
That's awesome. And you were a sergeant in community policing. Right?
I was. Yeah, I was a supervisor in patrol and then community policing, and then got promoted out of community policing as a captain back into patrol.
You were telling me a little bit before we started recording that basically every member of your family is in law enforcement. At least it seems that way.
Just about, which has been helpful because everybody really has the ability to use one another as a soundboard.
Yeah.
When things come up.
Your father was in law enforcement. You've got cousins and in-laws and outlaws and everybody that's in law enforcement, right?
Yes. I think my earliest memory would be maybe 5, 6 years old. My dad was always in uniform. Very impressed that he wore the uniform until the day he retired. But when I was 5 or 6, I remember he had a take-home vehicle, early Crown Vic, early 90s. And I've got a photo of me standing outside in our driveway next to this dark black or blue Crown Vic. Never had a desire to do anything else other than policing. Always knew I wanted to be a police officer. My wife is a captain as well in a different agency. And so our kids get to see that firsthand and experience that. So it's been a blessing to have the family members in law enforcement and understanding that, hey, we're not going to be there every day for every event. It's good to have that background and knowledge.
I bet, too, especially thinking of the topic we're talking about today, that it also gives you some continuity to stuff before you became an officer because you were witness to the technologies or the lack of technologies that your dad had and the older generation had.
Oh, absolutely. You hear the stories from the 70s and the 80s and even early 90s. They definitely didn't have some of the technology that we have today. But
and it's fascinating too because you've seen like the evolution of recording technology. There used to be basically a VCR recorder in the trunk of the patrol car, and before that there was nothing. And that's just evolved and miniaturized and become more computerized and have more capabilities than ever.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, we had VHS tapes when I started. We had
now you're dating yourself.
Yeah, we had VHS tapes in the car. We went to in-car systems, which you go to court, you have an in-car system on a traffic violation. It's pretty simple. Watch the video. Now you have body cameras, and I think that has changed for the better. The body cameras show the officers are 99% of the time doing exactly what they reported.
Do you ever have trouble getting officers on board with that idea that it's a benefit to them to be recorded? Because it seems invasive. I know a lot of them just feel like, and especially maybe some older ones who worked for several years without it. It was kind of a hard sell to be like, okay, so now you're going to watch me all the time and you're going to constantly audit this. And they were hesitant. What was your experience?
I really don't get any pushback on our officers when we deploy the body cameras. It's a part of the equipment bundle that they get. And they understand that, hey, there is policies behind it, and it's here to protect you and the agency and make your criminal cases that much stronger.
Yeah.
Having that video and audio is critical to show exactly what we are doing at any given point.
Where do you think the evolution of the body-worn camera is going to go next? I've heard like AI transcription and that kind of thing. I mean, is that probably the next step or is there something else?
Yeah, there's companies out there today that are writing reports based off body camera video alone. And you talk about AI writing reports, talk about a computer writing reports for an officer. That's cutting edge technology that we will look into at some point. I did not start in the era where you had to handwrite the reports. I luckily had the computer and the Word, but you hear about those stories where, you had to turn the reports into the sergeant at the end of the day, and if there was too much whiteout, they made you write the entire report over. Now we're talking about a computer watching your video from the camera and writing your report for you. I think is amazing.
Yeah. Where you're going to be editing the report, not having to write it from scratch.
Correct.
This is going to be a huge time saver.
We always look at the administrative time and what we can save on our officers and supervisors, and how do we reduce the administrative time yet still produce the quality report and the quality service and the quality investigation.
Yeah. Stuff that'll hold up in court.
Absolutely.
But get that officer back out on the street sooner.
And not always tied up doing the administrative functions.
And that seems to be the risk with more technology, is that you end up spending more time managing that technology. So if you can do that more efficiently, that is a big win.
But I think eventually what I would like to see from the body cameras and in-cars is that you have a live stream going back to somebody, whether it be dispatch or somebody that is dedicated to watching those live streams. The video itself is running an AI background. So when you come in contact with anybody, it's already doing a facial recognition type search. It's running that person against NCIC records, and it's providing any information before you ever even get the ability to run that person on your radio or go back to your car to run that person. So if that's a wanted person, dispatch is already notifying you of, hey, you have an issue here and we're sending you help.
So in the future, an officer is talking to the public and dispatch is telling him through his radio, oh, by the way, the person in front of you has warrants.
Correct. I haven't heard of any companies doing this. I just see the way things are going and progressing. It'd be a benefit to the officers to be that much more informed as soon as they can.
What about officer privacy? If he's writing two-man, everything those guys say to each other is recorded, or at least potentially recorded.
There's still fail safes. We have a 30-second look back on our videos, so they go back 30 seconds. We do not record the audio. there's some states and some agencies that have mandates on how far they go back and what they do record. I think that's always a balancing act of going, how much privacy do we give the officers versus how much do we protect the agency as well?
Right.
And it's always going to be that balancing act.
I feel that when I do ride-alongs, that, okay, there's a camera car, there's body-worn cameras or anything. If something happens, the previous 30 seconds of our conversation is going to be part of the record. And so that has changed to some degree what we talk about and how we talk when I'm in the car with the officer, but it hasn't stopped it. I mean, I do think we're both more careful. You know, I think that we're a little less loose about what we say or what we criticize because we know it is potentially going to be, you know, on the record. But for the most part, it hasn't stopped me as a chaplain from talking to somebody and somebody opening up and saying, yeah, I'm you know, this is hard and this is difficult and I'm frustrated with this or that. They still feel able to talk, and it hasn't stopped, especially the younger generation. The younger generation, they've just assumed, yeah, that I've got no privacy. Everything is everything is recorded somewhere. Yeah. And so,
well, and I think that's not necessarily a bad mindset to have, because whether it be the body camera or the citizen on the corner recording you, somebody is recording you somewhere. Unfortunately, it's just how society is these days. There's generally about 2 or 3 different videos of the same incident. It's just who's got them and where they belong. Yeah, they need to be mindful of what they are saying and how they're acting. Because they are being recorded, whether it be the agency recording them, giving them the equipment to record, or a citizen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, we're talking about integrity, and we have always wanted to encourage integrity, that we would be perfectly consistent in what we do. Yes, we're human. Yes, we make mistakes, but we're not going to be corrupt when the cameras are turned off. And so if the cameras are always on, then, you know, that's a higher level of accountability.
Absolutely.
Sure. What's your favorite technology in law enforcement?
I really like the technology regarding the real-time crime centers and drones. I think that is about to take off.
No pun intended, right?
Exactly. Chula Vista, California Police Department is really the inventors of drones as a first responder program.
Okay.
It's where they launch drones on calls for service, and they basically are able to respond to a call in 30 to 60 seconds and provide oversight with video, live streaming video to the officers responding. There's a video of one of their first major successes, a gentleman with a gun, and they have a drone overhead. The officers are still responding, and the drone captures that the gun is actually truly a lighter. It's not a gun at all. And it completely changes the way the officers respond, knowing that it's not a real gun. It doesn't take the danger out of the situation, but it does change.
It does change it, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's providing that insight where we don't get that if you don't have a drone or you have a live feed prior. You get the caller, you get the information from dispatch, it's filtered, and that's what you know going in.
Sure.
That was probably, when I saw that video, was probably the point where I go, that's what we need to do at my agency.
Yeah, that probably prevents an officer-involved shooting. Just that little bit of information.
Absolutely. I think de-escalation techniques are going to be woven into the drone systems. Having personnel that just monitor the technology that we have to give better insight to these officers that are on the street, making them safer, is all a win.
Well, we're going to come back to drones, but what other technology has maybe changed in your 18 years?
Social media is a treasure trove of information that officers absolutely use that gives you more investigative leads.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't solve your case for you.
So occasionally the dummy will put a picture of the gun with the serial number in a 4K video, you know.
Absolutely. I mean,
that does happen.
Those cases are nice. When you get those, they just aren't that often.
No.
There's different technology out there now that when you call the police, the officer responds, takes the report, whatever it may be. After that officer is cleared, you'll get a survey on the dispatcher and the officer. And you provide instant feedback, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, on the members of the police department that you interacted with, providing that feedback that we use to change policies or provide a morale boost where, hey, if you did a good job and the community appreciate it, they'll give you the good feedback.
So let's go back to drones. You said that was really going to change things.
Yeah. Drones right now are leveraging technology, and it's a force multiplier. It's going to provide us insight that we never had. If you're talking an average response time of 30 to 60 seconds on an overview of, a robbery or a crash scene, you're providing feedback not only to the police department, to the ambulance, to the fire department. Hey, these are the roads that we need to close. These are fleeing vehicles from the house at that disturbance, whatever it may be. You're providing that insight to the responding officers and dispatch that we wouldn't have if we didn't have drones. And so that is something that I think is really going to move us forward, having that technology. It's not every day that every agency has the ability to go and purchase a helicopter unit and man it every year.
Right. Similar capability, and in some ways better, at least in terms of operating cost and risk to flight personnel and people on the ground and that kind of thing. You were a supervisor in operations. What will this technology solve for you in that role, and where will it be in 5 years?
I think it's hard to imagine 5 years at this point at the pace we are going with technology. 5-year window. It's hard to say in 5 years what abilities we will have. I see the drones providing de-escalation. We utilize drones on barricaded situations. We send equipment in before we send humans in on most barricaded situations to try to establish that communication, try to end it peacefully. 5 years ago, we didn't have the drones. We didn't do that. So when you're talking about putting a officer in harm's way, when I can use technology to alleviate that is huge. If you're on any type of active scene, maybe a foot pursuit, our officers are all issued smartphones, so they can use an app, and I can plot those smartphones on a Google map and show exactly where all my members are. From an officer safety standpoint, that's critical. I want to know where they're going and where they're at during that critical call. Mm-hmm. But also from a supervisor standpoint, what resources do I have? What resources aren't on the call that have now filtered into this area that I don't know about because they haven't been on the radio, but I can utilize? Uh-huh. Which direction is that canine track going so I know I can get ahead of it just based on a drone feed and a map showing where my resources are? I think that's critical.
And you mentioned also the ability for drones to go take a peek, to go look where you don't have to send a human to do that first. I remember, goodness, it was 4 years ago now, but during COVID, in the early days, we weren't sure if it was safe to go into a house. I mean, this was really early on. We just didn't know. And we had a house where it was unoccupied, and we believed that there was a dead body inside. And so the SWAT team came out and sent a drone in, and literally flew a drone through the front door from room to room and located the body. And that helped a lot. But there's another area of drone use that I'm keenly interested in. It's with pursuits.
Pursuits are dangerous.
Yeah.
If you asked me in my career, I would have said that, hey, I believe we can do them safely, but we should be able to go after the criminals that are running and fleeing from the police. And I would tell you from my experience over time that it's not always worth it. A lot of these pursuits end up in crashes. And so if I can catch them tomorrow and make it safer, then I probably should.
Yeah.
So
because the drone could follow them home.
Some drones can. Some of these drones you can fly for miles out of visual sight.
And that touches on the fear that I see in my officers where they'll quote unquote lose them. If the drone can keep tracking them, then we don't have to have a high-speed pursuit. As fun as that is, we don't have to have a high-speed pursuit because the drones will keep track of that person, and we can basically wear them out and wait them out. When your father was a commander, there was no such position as captain of the technology unit. If the next generation of Breshears are in law enforcement, will the technology unit be much larger? Will it be different? Or what do you anticipate?
I hope our agency embraces it and expands it. That's a tough thing to say. Hey, I want more members off the streets to go and leverage technology.
But why should a cop be involved in that? Why shouldn't that just be a civilian position?
You got to have the mindset of a police officer. You have to be able to explain and know, this is the beat that I worked for years, and now I'm watching a camera and I know where that suspect is going to flee. I know which ways out of that neighborhood they're going to go, so I know where to look. Mm-hmm. And having that background is invaluable. There's some really good civilians out there that could do it, but it just makes sense to go and hire somebody that, hey, for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it may have been, I worked the streets. I worked this neighborhood.
Criminal behavior.
I know
the area.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's just things that police officers know that they can use the technology to help build that knowledge from what they know to what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And without that, it's very difficult. It can be trained, but it won't be as efficient day one if you don't have that background.
Do you think that the law and the protection of our civil rights is keeping up with technology? Do you think it will keep up with technology?
I think that's a great question. There's always going to be questions about the technology advancements that we use, which I think there should be, right? I think it's important that the public know what we are doing and that there are checks and balances in place, that these systems can't just be accessed by anybody at the PD and just ran for their own personal good.
Right.
There are audits that are mandated. There are those checks and balances. So, yeah, I believe that these technology advancements are critical. I think the public should be aware of some of the stuff that we do and we have access to. Having those open discussions, I mean, it goes back to my community policing days. It's come and talk to the police, man. We have a lot of information and we want to share it. You got to ask a cop on the corner, hey, what are you doing? Whatever it may be, and engage that.
I found most officers are surprisingly well informed when it comes to civil liberties and what your rights are, and they're pretty adamant about protecting those rights.
Absolutely.
And so to go ahead and ask, yeah, that would be a good thing.
I think the public would be surprised about how informed they really are, and what information they will share. Obviously, I mean, there's times and place to approach the officer.
Right.
Sometimes
not every tour is going to take you through the real-time crime center or dispatch. Sometimes that's off limits, right?
Yeah, but I would tell you, like, some of that stuff, I have no problem talking about it and showing it and going, these are what we do. So if your loved one or your family ever has an incident, this is the technology I use to try to resolve that matter. If your family member goes missing, I'm going to use every tool that I can to go find them. And I want to have all the tools and the best chance to do that.
Captain Breshears, thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate this. I just find this stuff fascinating.
I appreciate it, Jared. This is awesome. I think it's great that we're talking about technology. And I think it's something that's going to change immensely over the next 5-10 years easily.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank Richard Breshears for coming in and talking to me today. Actually came to my office and sat across the desk from me. Greatly appreciate that. We didn't even have the opportunity to really get into some of the other areas of technology on my list here. We did briefly discuss license plate readers, LPRs, but that didn't make the final cut. And there's all kinds of new non-lethal technologies. And then there's a whole world of firearm technology that has developed in the last few decades. We didn't touch on any of that. But something I did want to point out that, especially going back and listening to this afterward as I was editing, is how Captain Breshears talks about technology. It's interesting that he's not overly focused on the tech itself, or even how the tech can be employed against the bad guys. But in my discussion with him, both before and during the recording, he went out of his way to emphasize that technology can help with missing people, to help with silver alerts, and with missing children. And that's a key talking point, especially when talking to a community or community leaders that may be leery of government overreach or invasion of privacy and the threat to civil liberties. This technology can cut both ways. It's not just a scary thing that can hurt people. It's also something that can save lives and help the innocent. And that needs to be stressed. On the next episode of Hey, Chaplain.
Am I doing things right? Could I do things better? What have I done in the past? Or even what have I done that maybe I am proud of? Or what, maybe I have done some things that I could have done better, but I didn't do them too awful. It's like that sort of kind of a self-assessment, if you will. Every time I listen to him talk and he gets into that, I'm sitting there in my car, because I generally listen to you in the car, sitting there after the episode ends, kind of just playing these things through, and it's very, I think, good for me. So hopefully other people feel that way too.
I think he brings that out, and to me, that makes him almost the ideal interviewee for Hey, Chaplain. In fitting with the theme, the music today was generated by artificial intelligence. Thank you to Nicholas Panek for putting that together. This show remains a free resource for everyone because of those supporters who are quietly helping behind the scenes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to help this show reach more cops, chaplains, and other first responders around the world, please support the show by following the link in the episode description. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guests and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey, Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.